Welcome to TypeHelper to the rescue. Hey, I'm Eric, and this video is going to be about a code unit called the TypeHelper. And it's a very, very useful code unit that a lot of people don't really realize how much functionality is included in it. So I thought I would do a video on it because I had a couple of conversations where, big problems, simple solution, use the features in the TypeHelper. But I think we need to start just step one step back. Can you say that? Yeah, you can. And talk about what are types, and more specific that Pascal is a strongly typed language. And what does that mean? That means that when, let's say that we go and we create let's see if I can type tonight. We create two variables here, and I is equal 10, and then t is equal I. That's a nice program. Oh, let me put an equal to the 10 here. Right, that's a nice program. Apart from the little fact that you cannot assign an integer to text. No big deal, you're saying. We'll just use a format and then we're home free. So we used a TypeHelper kind of function format. Or perhaps it's the other way around, that it was t that was 10, and then we need to do something like this. Same result. Some languages are not as strongly typed as Pascal is, so they would say, we need to convert our text to an integer, we need to convert our integer to text, and then just do it for you. Some languages even do not even have dynamically typed language, such as the language called Lua. Springs to mind. I've done a lot of work with Lua, and in Lua, values have types, variables do not, and that gives us some interesting features, but also opens up for some interesting problems. Anyway, again, you would solve this guy, but okay, we need to call evaluate, so we take what we have and then we encapsulate that in a evaluate, and I'm not able to. Let's try to see if I'm evaluate. There we go. So now we are passing t to be passing that, and we're passing that. So here is the interesting part. Now we're passing as the local language we have. So actually, let's just for 1 second do the following. I'll do a message and then language. Wow, I can't spell tonight. Sorry. Language equal %2. Let's 1 and %2 here, and then let's grab the global language and grab Windows language. Let's just see what language ever. So if I'm deploying this now, hopefully we should get an idea of what the language is that we're running. Perfect. 1033, that's English. So that's exactly what I would expect this to be. So let's say that instead of integer, we're going to play with a decimal. So the problem with decimals is that there are several kinds of decimals. So if our text is now 10.5, and we will evaluate this one, and then we'll do a message of result is equal %1. I think this will, everybody knows what we're going to get now here. We are probably going to get a message saying 10.5. Perfect. But what if, because, you know, I have a crazy accent, so I'm Danish. Big surprise. But in Denmark, for unknown reasons, we use a comma as the decimal point, not the dot. So now I'm in an English version evaluating my Danish formatted decimals, and now I'm getting the wrong result. And how do I solve that? I could probably solve it by, you know, doing something crazy by saying that t equals t dot replace commas with dots. That would probably work for this number at least. But we're even stranger in Denmark, because if this was 10,000 and a half, we use the dot for the thousands placement, whatever that's called. And other languages has other means of this. If somebody in Sweden is on the line, let me know if I'm totally wrong, but I think they use spaces for something, that the 1,000 delimiters is a space. I may be wrong on that, but the point here is that how do we tell evaluate that the string that we are giving it is formatted in a different language than what our BC happens to be running here? And we can see that there's a secret parameters to evaluate. And I think that if we go and look this up, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Business Central evaluate. We'll find that the only thing that we can put on that third parameter is the number 9, which is strange here, but that means that no matter what our local formatting is, evaluate the part of the string as if it was XML formatted. So the only thing you can do is you can add a 9. There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're not able to, because what would be cool, that I know that the Danish language, so we saw that English was 1033. I know that Danish happens to be 1030. So if I could pass that on here and then run this, then we would be golden, and this video would be very, very short. But let's see, did it break? Yeah, compile debugger saying that, hey, that's not gonna fly. It's just gonna be ignored, actually, that number. But still, this can't be evaluated. It cannot be passed as a decimal. So how do we solve this? Well, as the title of the video implied, we need a TypeHelper. Let me not remove. I just want to move this guy. So let's go in and you know the normal place we would go look for something like that would of course be in the system application app, because this is where stuff like this is. And if we do all here, there's certainly something that's called type, but there's nothing type-ish. And the reason for this is very strange, that this code unit is still sitting in the base app. This is code unit number 10, a very, very low number actually. Just before I started the video, I thought, why is this number 10? And then I went to look in the very, very old version of Navision, the character-based. Didn't exist. There were a GL shift functionality, and then I looked in a version 5 and it was not there. So it's still an old one, but I don't know why it was number 10. Anyway, so here is code unit number 10, and we can see that straight out of the bat here we have an evaluate function, and it takes a variable as a variant, which is string. Let's get back to that for a second. Then a string, then a format, and a cultural name. So how do we get this function to work? We can see the variable is returned, blah, 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 string is input. Format is in format mm-dd-yyyy, only use supported on date, search msdn for more details, culture info.name property. MSDN doesn't exist anymore, that has been replaced with Microsoft Docs. Cultural name is in the format en-us, search MSDN for more details, custom date and time format, strings. So MSDN doesn't exist anymore, but that should not keep us from locating that. I can't remember where are we at. Did I really close that? I had it open just before we started. No, that's because that's the wrong browser. Let me kill this browser. Haha, here it is. This guy, and I will put the link to this in the description below, so you can, right after you hit subscribe, if you're not already subscribed, that would be lovely, then you can check out this link. And there's a bunch of sub pages: standard numeric format string, custom format string, standard date and time, and custom date and time span, and so on. So lots of documentation. But let's go back to this function for a second. So can we get this to work here? And let's try to keep this not on screen. Yeah, we could. No, let's just go back here and say, okay, so we need to use the TypeHelper code unit for this. So let's create an instance of that. And then we need to get this to work instead. So let's go TypeHelper.evaluate. And the first parameter is a variant. So we can call that V, because that's how we roll here on the channel. We use short variable names to avoid typing. And then we have our string. That was easy. That's the T. Then we need a format. So let's think about that. We'll just call it. No, we just do an empty string for now. And then we need a cultural name. And we saw that from this guy that should be en-us, which, since we want the Danish one. So what is the Danish one called? Well, hopefully, no, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm sorry, guys. But let's add in a culture info text in the TypeHelper. There is a function called, let's see if we can find it, called language ID to culture name. So if you have the language ID like 1030, which is Danish, then we can get the culture name. So if we just ignore all this for a second and see what do we get when we run, what will we get out of this one from 1030? DA-DK. Aha, Danish and Denmark. So instead of having to figure out these combinations, we can just use this function. So already at this point, we are pretty much in business. So let's go back to this guy. Ignore this guy. So we want to pass the culture info here. Then we need to tell the type. So let's go back to the page here and look at standard numeric format strings. So C is a currency, D is a decimal, E exponential, F is a fixed point, G is a general. So I think I will go with G here. So what we need to pass this one a G. And then if you remember, because I've fallen into this trap before, so this is weird, because remember that we're passing a variant, right? And what this function will do is case true of variable dot is date time, is decimal, is integer. So we need to, in order for us to get a value in the variant, we need to give the variant a value, because that will give the variant a type, which is, so again, this code unit is old because this would never be done this way. If Microsoft, if you put this code unit into system application, the first pull request you'll get from me was to create overloads for this function, so you can just pass date, time, decimal, integers. So we don't have to go through all those hoops, because the hoops is that we need to go through now. That this looks totally strange, but we will do variant equal our decimal, and at this point, well, this is just 0, but we need to make sure that our variant is actually a decimal of type, for us to, when this guy is finished, go back and see, and D is equal the variant, and then we can output D. Let's try this. If this has any chance of working. Boom, it did work. So now the 10,000 and a half is, you can see that this is formatted with a comma as a 1,000 delimiter, and the decimal point is a dot, even though what we inputted was the opposite. Oh, too much scrolling. What we inputted was the exact opposite with the Danish formatting. I've seen tons of strange code trying to avoid manhandling data into be able to be evaluated on whatever platform you have, on whatever language you're in, but you're getting data in a different format. But this guy is the right way of doing it. I know that it looks totally stupid with the variants surrounding it, but hopefully we can get to be able to do a pull request for this at some point. But this is pretty cool. And as you can see here, this works for dates, date time, decimal, and integers. The exact same way of doing this. And we got more. So we also got a so you got an evaluate, and this evaluate can do a date, and then you have one more that will try to evaluate a date. So in case it fails, then it will return false. So another way of doing this, same principle. date time, same thing. Sorry. Here, I'm losing my mind. The function we're calling are calling into those separate functions. So what we just did actually calling into these functions. I'm sorry, I totally lost my my location here. Anyway, this one continues. So when we passed evaluate, we get to get localized month to end. So we can get the name of the month as an integer. We can function to compare date times and get an integer out, which is pretty cool. Here's another fun one. Format a date. This one is weird because we just went through a little hoop to get a culture ID, but here we're actually passing just the language ID. Again, I think somebody needed a function they added to this one. There's also format date. So this is format date with language ID, format date with current culture, and somewhere there's also a format a date with a culture. Get hour, minutes, seconds from time. I think I've seen this function being implemented by tons of people all over the place because they didn't know that there were a function for this in here. Is leap year, another great function. Language ID to culture name, that's the one we just used. Get culture name will just get the current culture. Then we get into something, again, this is a long list of random functions. Get option number. So this function will be replaced with some of it when we go to enums. Have you seen the video on enumify your options? Otherwise, check that out. Get option number. So get the option number from a string of options. Get option number from table field. Get option number. Options are equal. Is numeric. Again, this is left field, right field. It's all over the place. So can something be evaluated? Yes or no? Get a field from a table. Get field length. Test if field is not obsolete. Is phone number, which is, so it's using the regex and well, it may be a phone number, but it's not necessarily a phone number. That function is perhaps less useful. Get user's time zone offset. That's very useful because in many cases, get current date time, get today, and just today. Those functions will return UTC dates. If you're running stuff that is not connected to a logged in user, you'll get UTC values like a web service, which might not be what you want. You get user client type offset, more of that. Convert a Unix timestamp. So in Unix, time is calculated as the milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. And yeah, sometimes you get a Unix timestamp and you need to get that into a date time. And so on. And you can see here format date times. Now we're getting into the format function that again takes the culture name. Format UTC, get current. There are lots of functions on that again. Add hours to date time. Again, you get date time plus calculate the time zone plus 7 hours or minus 7 hours and so on. Here's another one that's quite fun. So format decimal. So we can go back here, and then let's take this one, and then go the other way. So we can do TypeHelper.format. You see there's multiple format functions. Format decimals, and the decimal is our D, and the data format will just go with the G again, and the data formatting culture will be our culture info, so that should be Danish. So if we run this again, then we're hopefully going full circle here. Apparently we're not with the 1000 delimiter, but just with the comma. That might be because I chose general, the G, but we got a Danish formatting of the decimal point. So the companion to the evaluate, the format functions are also here. Now we're getting into a couple of functions that are very, very useful, but are really, let me find a nice way to say this. These are implemented in a less optimal way. So URL encode, which is great if you have something that you need to URL encode, then you know a space should be %20 because that hex for 32, and 32 is the ASCII code for space, and so on. So sometimes you need to have a string and you pass it to URL, and you need to make sure that the string doesn't contain control characters that will make the URL not work. So you have to URL encode them. And if you get something like that, you have to URL decode them, which is great. So if T is our the thing we need to decode, then you would do T equal TypeHelper URL encode T. That looks very nice. But there's a problem here. And the problem is that if we look at how this function is implemented, there's 2 lines of code. So how much can go wrong? Plenty. So you can see that the parameter is var transferred by reference, but there's also return value. So we're returning it, but we're also changing in place. So this line is the exact same, has the exact same functionality as this line. Those two will do the same. The problem comes that this is really not default behavior, and this makes a lot of interesting issues if you have the code analyzers that try to figure out sizes and so on, because suddenly you're replacing stuff that you don't want to. So if I were to rewrite this, I would remove the var transfer and only stick with the functional description. So only this would work. This would never work. That would be my choice for this, because doing both is just a mess. Anyway, sorry for the rant. This goes on. There's also an HTML version. So if you need to encode HTML, then you know the brackets but you see here, URI escape data string. That one is newer, so this one does not do it the in place by reference. Nice function that I use in a lot of places, get key as a string. Very important when you need to, for some reason, you need to refer to an entire record as a string, like the record ID thing. Read as text with separators. So we get a line separator on an int string, and we have a function here that will give us the character return line feed separator. So instead of having code where you do this, and with the chance of reversing them, like Steve encountered a while ago, because the documentation for this was actually so Microsoft documentation did this, and they got it wrong. So they said 1030 instead of 3010. 13, sorry, 1310. Anyway, so that's funny. Some record ref functionality to handle sorting. A function to calculate text disk and return the number of edits to get from text 1 to text 2. So how different are two texts? Levenstein distance, there's the Wikipedia URL here. I think this is something like that they're actually using in the search function when you go and go in the tell me. Haven't really used it much. I used it at some point to go and figure out if I think I used it once, and the idea is that I was looking for duplicate names. So I was looking to see if there was stuff that were almost the same. So trying to catch typos and avoid creating the same customer again and stuff like that. Interesting. If you have a good use case for this function, let me know in the comments below. Okay, we're nearing the end now. Getting a new line, getting the lowest of 3 numbers, if you need that, and then some obsolete. Get maximum number of parameters in an SQL query, 2100. Here's another fun one. So AL slash, mostly AL, misses the bitwise operations. So here we have 2 integers, and we can do a bitwise and bitwise OR, and bitwise exclusive OR, and then we're back to get formatted current date time in user time zone. And so date functions again, more date function. I think we did. Another fun one, integer to hex. So in case we need to convert something from integer to hex, well, we can do that, get a maximum or minimum of 2 values. Transfer field with validate, another nice function here. I'm not gonna demo it, but that's sometimes very useful. Calculate logarithmic, because that's not part of the built-in math. Get amount format LCY with user local, and get amount format. So we're back to formatting, lots of formatting. Lots of formatting, currency, style, and that is it. Wow. So you can see that it's a treasure trove of great functions, and they're just sitting here very undocumented as far as I know. So if somebody from the Microsoft documentation team will say, no, we got all this document, then I apologize. But what I see here is a bunch of functions that I see people write themselves, and typically less as elegant than if we exclude the URL encodes things. So my suggestion is that if you need some, if you're in the process of suddenly handling data from a different locale, different language, use the functions in here. I can say that in BCCL, my data import-output tool, you should totally check that out, by the way. I use this a lot because it supports XML. Fine, that's predetermined how you format stuff. It uses JSON, also predetermined. Excel, also predetermined. But CVS file, CSV file, TSV file, all the separated files, there's no concept of what is the formatting in that. So you can have a Danish CSV file, and that's fine, or you can have a Norwegian or a UK or whatever it is, and that's just how it is. So in BCCL, I've created a way so people can define what language the file is, and then I actually use the evaluate functions that are in here for everything to convert from whatever's in the CSV file into BC. So I can say that my BC is whatever it is, but the file I'm receiving is Danish, so I handle each field through the evaluate function and pass it that it should be 1030 because it's Danish. So lots of goodies in here. Try them out and let me know in the comments below how that went. And until next time, have a wonderful day.